Welcome, Fluff, to Home is Where the Dark Is. Man, thank you so much for coming by. It's awesome to meet you finally in person. I've learned a lot about you, and I've seen your work and what you've been up to. So when I was listening to a working class audio interview, you spoke about how there was a certain car accident that changed the trajectory of your life. And
Oh yeah.
so I think that's something to be said about, there's certain things in life, like whether they're like tragic or euphoric, that happen to us that totally change our path. And for you, it was something not so great that led you on a path to something fantastic. So
Yeah.
how do you, like, looking back on that in retrospect, I mean, do you feel like, because obviously you're all about music, and when you're talking about in your hometown, like everyone else was doing other things, but you were like all about music. And
Yeah.
do you think if that didn't happen, that you would do you think you would be in the music industry in some other way?
Nope.
No.
But with that said, I always knew, like, at an early age, and this is going to sound really weird, but I always kind of knew at an early age that music would be in my world on some level. So when I say no, that I don't think so, I think I would have just ended up being comfortable, where I was at, and just being home with my family, and just that would have been that. Now, unfortunately, there was this kind of not fun car accident that I was in, that was the catalyst to get me out of my hometown, right?
Yeah.
And then just put me on a path that I'm still currently on, and everything around me, literally everything around me, is because of that car accident. So, when I talk to some of my other friends, I keep on telling them when they're having bad stuff kind of going on, it's just like, it's kind of the standpoint of just, well, maybe, I kind of say that a lot, they're like, well, this is going on, blah, 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 and I'm having these hardships or these successes or whatever. And it's just kind of like, well, maybe, it's like everything ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
Nothing lasts forever, and you don't really know when something tragic is happening. It's tragic at the time, and there's a lot of hurt and all of the stuff that comes with it, right? But you don't really know down the line, being 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, what that scenario is going to kind of bring you, and I didn't know at the time, but now it's like, well, something that was super, not fun, let's just say. And at the, being in that, I was just like, what am I going to do? I don't know. I thought, it was like, man, I'm going to be struggling for the rest of my life because of this, and not the case. So it's just one of those weird kind of scenarios. Just a weird path that was my journey, I guess,
Yeah. So do you believe like the universe has a plan for us all, or do you believe we are completely in control of our path, or in the middle?
I think it's kind of a combination of both. Like, I think that there are certain things in your journey that are kind of laid out for you, and I think that within that, you choose left or right or center or whatever, so I think on some level you have control. But I also feel that if there's a lesson that the universe is trying to teach you, it's going to teach you, if it's at that instance or in an instance that's going to happen 2 months down the road. Like, there's going to be a learning thing that happens, and I feel like you just need to be aware and take a step back and kind of see the reality for what it is, instead of being inside of it.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, a lot of times it's not as hindering, let's say. If you could take the step back and be like, well, this happened. Okay, well, why? And what can I learn from it? And how can I move forward? And how can I basically be a better person? Like Chrissy and I talk about it all the time. We're just like, I feel the thing with life is you just try to be a better person today than what you were yesterday. And everybody has bad days, everybody has good days. But if that's kind of in your mindset when you wake up, to just be like, I'm going to try to be better than what I was yesterday. Most people, I think society in general, globally, right, would probably be a more harmonious society.
I agree.
People get bogged down with whatever they have going on in the worlds. And then when they get into a place of irritation or frustrations or whatever, they act a certain way, and then people around them might easily judge, when frankly, I feel anyhow, what should happen is maybe you should ask that person instead of just writing them off as being an a-hole or whatever. Maybe you should ask them, because you don't know what's going on in the world. Maybe their parents just died. Maybe, you don't know. Like, they might be having a really hard time and they don't know how to ask for help or to express it or to whatever, because most people don't. Unfortunately, our society doesn't really give people the skills while you're in school, in your developmental stage, to learn how to like communicate on that kind of level.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally
And
right.
it's, so I think people struggle with that, and people, I think a lot of good people probably get written off and relationships get ruined because maybe there's some underlying thing that was more of a catalyst than that current moment, right? So
Yeah, a lot to unpack with all that, what you just said. What comes to mind is, so you're saying, we often can make quick assumptions or judgments about people, especially. And most of the time it's like, there's all these, there's allegations, there's what you see on social media, what you see in the press, and that's a big part of the world of music and metal, which we see on a day-to-day basis. But the fact of the matter is, most of these people saying all these terrible things and judging, like, they don't know the people that they're talking about. So to me, it's like, you don't know these people.
Yeah.
You don't know who they are. They don't know what goes on in their personal life. So you really have no idea who they are, if any of this is true. So, and I think that translates to studio etiquette is like, I think one of the biggest things about what we do, it's not only our technical skill set, our creative skill set, but it's about etiquette in the studio and being someone that's a good hang that what you want to be around. I think a lot of what you spoke about previously in different interviews about your work with Prince is being able to read the room, understand how to, communicate with artists, and each artist is different. Each artist needs different attention to detail, needs a different approach. So do you feel like, maybe, if up and coming engineers or people that are interested in doing this for a career, do you feel that that's more important? Who you are as a person and what you bring to the table to the artists, and how easy it is to communicate, or the technical skills, or both?
I mean, I think it's a combination for both. I mean, if you're just a good hang and you can't get the room running, you're not going to really last long, right? Maybe you could get hired as a PA. I don't know. I feel like if you're kind of an a-hole, but you're super technical and can get the room running, people don't want to be around that. I feel, with artists, especially like what I'm going to call like artists, like the people that are like artistic and they got their own thing, and their music is their baby, right? Now from there's other artists that they're kind of, it's like they're not really making their own music. They have a kind of a team behind them that's doing it all behind the curtain, and then they just look good on a magazine, But
many come to mind, yeah,
right. So when you take like the Princes or even like the KoRns, because they're all super creative. Jonathan is a force to be reckoned with for sure. To me, it's a little bit of it's a combination of both. It's, I always feel like I'm never getting hired to get a kick drum sound. I mean, maybe that's why Chrissy hires me. I don't know. But I think the majority of it is I'm just able to facilitate their creativity. So whatever they pull out of the hat, which can be flipping on a dime, I'm able to keep it going and not have it be like, okay, you want to do this? Well, now we got to stop for 4 hours and try to figure it. It's just like, let's just get it going. I'm that guy that's all about experimenting. So for instance, if Prince or Jonathan or whatever just wants to try the weirdest stuff, zero judgments for me. Like, I don't care, because I don't know what that's going to, he might have the wackiest idea and you're like, okay. And then you're like, oh, like Prince, the story of Prince, he wanted to light his Marshall cabs on fire while he did a solo because he wanted to sound like the solo was on fire.
Perfect.
You don't know what that's going to be like. Most people be like, you want to do what? It's like, let's go. I mean, it's your gear, your money. We're torching it. Out comes the fire department, and let's get it. And it was cool, right? So a lot of times there could be really cool stuff that happens from just cultivating those super creative people and allowing, as crazy as it might seem at the time, allowing that stuff to flow, because that's how you get new stuff. And before you know it, you're actually changing the climate of music, because nobody's done that. You know what I mean? Where you're like, wow. So, I think it's very important. I mean, obviously you want to have people want to have you around. That's definitely a plus, but if you can facilitate people's creativity and still be good, I'm, I guess probably better than average on the technical side, but I think that's where it's all about, because at the end of the day, we are making music, nobody. And the other advice I have to say is you're going to get a lot farther if you don't make it about you.
Right. Because ultimately it's about serving the artists and catering to what their needs are and what their creative habits are, even if it's something as crazy as lighting a cab on fire. If you're Prince, can do whatever you want, let them do what they want to do. And
100%.
And we're not there to be like, that's a stupid idea, or we're not there to say no ever.
Yeah.
Right? We're there to
just yep. And if it gets to be really crazy, it might be like, okay, well, it's X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
So now that I gave you all the factors that I foresee as being possible problems, if you still want to do it, let's do it. Yeah. I don't try to let them necessarily go into the scenario blind, if they're not thinking of something, but I'm definitely not telling them no, because in my brain and in my workflow, by the time you have a conversation of why they shouldn't be doing it, you could have just done it and heard it and then decided if it's making the cut to the finish line, or if you're trying something else. It's literally easier just to let them purge their creativity, and you just try to capture it and try to make it, try to what's the term I'm looking for? Embellish what they're trying to do, right? Again, that's my own personal experience. There's probably people out there that are like, yeah, I don't agree with him, but Prince loved me, he was out there for a long minute,
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, I always try to put myself in the artist's position. It's like, okay, if I was hiring Fluff or whoever to engineer or produce my record, I would want them to allow me complete artistic freedom, no matter what.
Yeah, right.
So if I want to try a weird take with a different vocal tone or whatever, it's comforting to know that they will allow me to do it, and they will allow me to explore my creative side no matter what, as opposed to some engineers are a bit more, and producers a bit more rigid, and they have their thing that they do, and they're a bit more strict about, allowing the artist to experiment. So
I get that side too. There's people out there that literally, it sounds like they're making the same record every time, and until the singer comes in, you don't really know who the difference of the bands are, right? Mm-hmm. And and I'm not judging that, but because I get it, because from a business side, from labels, there's a lot of labels and A&R people that love that, because they know exactly what the end product's going to be before the studio session even starts.
Yeah.
So those people there's a necessity there to fill that gap, right? For me, I'm not really that guy. I've actually tried to make something be the same, and I'm like, I can't do it. So I'm just I'm not even going to try to force that. I've never made the same record twice, even with the same artist, even with Prince, I made a couple records with him. It's they all sound different.
Absolutely.
Even though it's the same guy sitting back there with the guitar and the bass, it's just they're all their own animal, right? It's the same thing with KoRn. I mean, KoRn's a great example too, because they've never made the same record twice. Sonically, you're just
they have such a vast array of tones and textures across their discography. That's extremely impressive and rare.
And to me, it's refreshing, because you're just what are we going to come up with today? Which is exciting for me. That's exciting instead of being like in this. And again, not knocking like an AC/DC because I'm a huge AC/DC fan, but AC/DC is AC/DC, and all the records sound the same, and there's charm to that for sure. But it's just like, okay, well, this is exactly how this guitar tone needs to be. This is exactly how this drum sound needs to be. It's not really that way with KoRn. It just needs to be musical. It's not that way with Prince. It just needs to be musical, especially to him. That's all he ever cared about. He wasn't ever trying to win, this record sounds the most dope, and I'm trying to get everybody to use my record as a reference.
Yeah.
He didn't care. For him, it was all about his idea and how that's going to translate to the listener and what he wants the listener to feel from it. That's where he was coming from. So sometimes with him, we'd be moving extremely fast where he would just like guitar DI into a couple pedals and then he's going for it. We wouldn't be getting guitar tones some of the time. You're just like, okay. And you're just like trying to keep up with them.
Yeah.
But he's trying to create this thing and how he wants it to be perceived by the listener. So, and there's a real art to that, and that's when I say like a real artist, and I'm not taking anything away from the other people because that's a craft as well, but when you get to those type of people that I'm talking about, they can pull those strings of like, I'm going to play this solo a little bit different in the performance and you're going to feel a different way.
You know what I loved about what you said when he accidentally like deleted on the tape machine, like the beginning of one of the solos. He's like, I don't care. I'll redo it. I love that because it's like, well, like not making things precious because he knows,
nothing's precious to that dude. Cause he, and there's a certain, again, it must be easy when you're Prince, right? But, there's a certain level of I'll just do it better. And he would, right? Where you're going like, because there's obviously, and I've dealt with some other artists where all of a sudden it's just like, that's the take, don't touch it. It's, now it's on this pedestal per se, right? He was never that way. He was just, there's so many times he'd be blasting solos and you're just goosebumps and hairs just, and you're like, what is happening right now? And he just, I'm sorry, take me to the top of the solo. And then you get one that for whatever reason struck his chord. And it was dope still, but you're like he's an artist. Like he doesn't give a shit about tuning. His stuff would be in tune, but like if there's something that struck his chord and there's a little bit out, he didn't care.
Yeah.
Like he didn't care about timing. He didn't care. He's just like, it's music. Like what? Like,
no grids.
Why would you grill that? No grids. Like, let me tell you, like I would have to tempo map every song. And it was sometimes a pain in the...
I bet. Wow.
But
so, a lot to unpack there. But I want to ask you, like, what do you feel is... Because, not only technicality, creativity, studio etiquette, but a lot of all of that goes into... I think one of the most important things about working with an artist and having them be comfortable is trust. Mm-hmm. They have to trust you in every facet, every part of the process. So... For you, from your experience, what do you do, or what do you feel is essential to gain the artist's trust?
Well, I think the biggest thing is don't lie to them. It might seem funny, but it's the truth. Mm-hmm. I feel, in like the Prince scenario, there's a couple big conversations we had that I think really gained his trust. The first one was, and this is coming, and I remember I got some amazing advice. A good friend of mine, he's a mastering engineer, Vlado Miller, mm-hmm. I think he mastered the Emancipation record for Prince, but he gave me the best advice before I ever walked out there. He's just like, don't lie to him. You know what I mean? All he's got is yes men out there, so just don't lie to him. So I went in, and he goes, always think of it like it's your last day with the artist that's on that level, mm-hmm. because then you don't have this emotion of you're trying to maintain something, and then you can actually, there's freedom there to be honest.
Yeah.
If you go in every day being like, today's my last day, and I'm just going to do the best I can do, there's a freedom there, right? So with that, I remember we're like 6 or 7 days into the first project I was doing with them, and all the sync went haywire between the SSL and the tape machines and the Lynx modules, and I remember just being like, ugh, and and he walked out of the room. He's like, and he walks out of the room. I'm like, oh my god, and I'm like pulling up the floor panels and like look at and he comes in and he's just like, how long is this going to take to fix? And I was just like, well, do you want a Band-Aid or you want it fixed? He's like, well, what do you think? I'm like, I think you want it fixed. He's like, mm-hmm. I'm like, you're going to give me like 3 to 4 days.
Wow, yeah.
3 to 4 days, we'll fix it. We'll triple check it, quadruple check it. It will be good, and we'll never have to deal with this problem again. Now, the thing with Prince is when you say something, it's like Bible to him. So it's like if you ask for like, I just need 20 more minutes to get a better kick drum sound. When he comes in 20 minutes, it better be a better kick drum sound, or he's never going to give you that leeway again, right? So he went away, and then it was, we got in, and it was just old wires, and we just redid all of it, basically. Yeah. Just replaced everything, and then it was rock solid, and we never had to deal with it again. So that was the one where I think he was just like, okay, because side note, somebody like P, the only time I ever really saw him get frustrated or agitated or whatever, grumpy, let's say is probably a better term for it, would be when he wants to be creative and he's got technical problems that are hindering him.
That's completely understandable.
That's when you'd see him just get, you'd feel his energy change, right? So that was the first instance. The second instance was, I remember he looked at me, we're like 2 weeks into it, and he just goes, I don't care what you want to charge me. I want you on a weekly salary, and just send me, every Sunday, send me the bill. And I said, I'm not going to do that. And he just hit stop on the SSL, He's like, what do you mean? And I'm just like, I don't want to, no. You pay me, it's a 2-hour minimum, and I'll work. You have full access to me, all the same. You could call me at 3 o'clock in the morning. I will still come out. It is all good. I'm not taking your money if I'm not working, period. So I want to do an hourly rate, and there it is. And again, if you're in the middle of vocals, because the majority of the time he do vocals by himself, and you need me just to come out and flip analog reels, I'll do that. It's just a 2-hour minimum, but I don't want to be taking your money if I'm not working for it.
Yeah,
and he's like,
it's admirable.
Cool.
Yeah,
cool. And so I think that was a big thing, because I think, on his level, there's a lot. I mean, most people would jump at that, for sure. And I'm not knocking the people that have, because he's the one that's offering it.
Right.
But I didn't want to do that. Like, that was just like, And there's, my benefit of it is, even though I'd still go out there on a whim to work with him, and I was out there for, like 3 years or whatever, there's that sense of me of like, I'm not chained to him, of this, because of the salary. Like, there's like a certain amount of freedom of not being salaried. So, that, I think that's where I gained a lot of trust with him. And I was just able to keep him going, where like there was like months where there'd be like no technical problems at all, and he could just work, So I think that over time, gave him more kind of comfort and trust with me.
Sure. Yeah.
So, in the KoRn world, I think the big one was, I think everybody just loves my personality and the calmness of me, right? But I was able to really whip their facility into shape, and I think that just had a lot of trust, because there's as we talked about before the show, there's some gremlins, let's just say, up there, and I pretty much put them all in the headlock and then sweep their leg,
Nice.
So I think with that, somebody especially like Jonathan, who's super savvy with the gear, and he like, I think he just really loved that somebody was up there that actually can get it all going, and then not only keep it going, but actually maintain it and care for it on a level that he cares for it, because what I appreciate about Jonathan, especially over somebody like Prince, is that, he likes his gear to be working. Like, man, I'd be out at Paisley, and you'd open up a closet, and there'd be like, no joke, just a whole wall of Pultecs that don't work.
Fuck.
And I'd be like, why don't you get these fixed? He's like, I don't got time for that. You don't got time for that. Like, what are you talking about? They probably just need to be retubed. Like, what is happening? You know, like literally gear everywhere. We're like, that's just like in closets. I'm just like, this is insanity. Jonathan is not like that. You know, as soon as there's something like, this is weird, he's like, bring it to the tech. Like, it's immediate. We get it fixed moving forward. So everything up there works top notch, you know, like, and I appreciate that aspect of him instead of just me and my love for gear looking at stuff being like, I really wish that worked.
I love when artists take pride in not only like their musicianship, but everything that goes into their craft, like gear, the recording process, maintaining, like I absolutely love that. So like you getting to work with Prince, who is like that, and Jonathan, like it's just like full immersion into music. Yeah. So there's a theme for this podcast, which a themed question. The question is, what was one of the darkest times in your career, and what did you do to overcome it?
Oh, we're going to go there.
Yeah.
One of the darkest times in my career, honestly, and she knows because she was the guitar player. So there is somebody very dear to me, Kelly, and she was literally the first project I ever worked on as I got out of college, right? This amazing, tiny little guitar player who could just shred, and she could sing, and she could songwrite. And, you know, I worked on some stuff in the very beginning, you know, and then I kind of went on my own path, right? And she was on her own path. Well, then, it, you know, even though we were close, it came back around, and she called me, and she's like, I need help with something, and, you know, we've been working on this for a long time, and can you help us get to the finish line, right? Yes, and that's when I met her. I remember, you know, Lissy being like, who's this guy? You know, just being like, what? Just shut up, you. I don't know you. But anyhow, back to the story. Kelly, I remember we finished the vocals on the last song, and there was like this kind of acoustic song with like cello and stuff, and she was complaining that she had trouble breathing while she was singing, so she just did 2 takes. Well, the next day she went into the doctor to find out she had cancer, unfortunately. So we kind of worked on some things, then it kind of paused, and she, you know, it cleared out. I think it was like 90% of the cancer cleared, and then everything was looking on the up and up, and everybody was stoked, and everybody was happy, and then, you know, I remember I was in the studio working on another project, and then Kelly's wife, Teresa, called me. She's like, you got to come to the hospital. I'm like, what? Like, kind of out of the blue, because I'm like, what are you talking about? I got to come to the hospital. She's like, you got to come to the hospital now. I'm like, okay, you know, and I cruised down there to find out, you know, everything came back, you know, 100 times worse, and you know, they're going to give her like 7 to 9 days, I think it was. Just crushed, you know. So then everything in my world stopped, and, you know, Kelly did hospice, and you know, we were all there, and when she passed, and I remember I sent the rough mixes we had to Vlado. I called Vlado. I'm like, I need a solid, you know. And he's like, sure, and he just kind of mastered it, and she was able to like hear the record at that point of it before she passed, you know. But then when that was done, we went in and then properly finished the record. And then we went back out to Vlado, and then he mastered it and all that stuff. But I just remember that kind of put me in a very dark place, you know? And then when that got done, it got kind of into a darker place because, you know, Kelly and I, our birthdays were a day apart, same age. We used to like celebrate, and, you know, I remember just being like, ugh, like couldn't be creative. I tried to be in the studio. Studio sucked. You know, I'm like, fuck this studio, you know, just kind of like going down the hole. Well, 6 months after that is when P died. And I remember just being like, I am so over this town. Like I'm, you know, at that point, you know, I moved to Arizona, and then I took a year off and basically meditated, and, you know, but that's probably the darkest period in my career, to deal with somebody that close to me dying and then having to like listen to her voice and her songs and knowing what some of the songs were about and how dark some of the songs were, because they had to talk, she wrote from her very own personal experience, and some of it was very dark for her. And it was just very rough and it sucked.
It's heavy, man.
But we got there because we were just like, well, this needs to get done, and then through that, then we started a foundation for her and all this stuff. But the Kelly Nicole Foundation. But it was rough. That was probably the darkest time. And there's moments of COVID that got very dark for me, but yeah, that was 2000, end of 2015, beginning of 2016. It was kind of a really, really dark period.
Yeah. Yeah, I can relate. Is when we're going through difficult times, it's really hard to find inspiration in the studio, and it's really hard to like
you just don't want to be there.
Yeah,
like all I wanted to do was just sit in a dark room and just process. Like I know people that they rely on like drugs or booze, when they get into a very heavy and deep kind of scenario. I've never really been that guy. I'm the person that will get like that will lock myself in my room and with no lights on, and I will get in my brain and try to process it and get it to a place of acceptance, I guess, and then I could move on and start getting back to my normal, and I've always been that way. But yeah, it wasn't fun.
And is that part of your meditation process? Like when you're going through dark times, do you use meditation as a tool to help?
And honestly, usually when I'm in a dark time, I can't get myself calm enough to actually meditate. I mean, I'm a heavy meditator, but when it gets to a moment, I can't. My super analytical brain is just ping-ponging inside, and I can't get to a spot to where I could reach that spot where I could start doing the thing,
Yeah, absolutely.
So
yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, by the way, because I know it's it's a dark place to go. I also had someone pass about almost 2 years ago now, but he was a mastering engineer. Actually, his name was Mike Wells. He took his own life, but yeah, and I remember that I felt the same way. Like it was really hard for me to get in and be creative, and like I had a bunch of projects like pending, and I had to like take a week off and just kind of process, because we worked together like closely on a lot of stuff. But yeah, I totally relate.
Yeah, and it's hard because I feel like, especially when it comes to like death, it's everybody processes stuff differently, and it's so hard. I was lucky enough to be in the spot to where I can be like, I'm taking a year off, and everybody can, not necessarily fuck off, but it's like, I'm taking a year off. I'll be around, but I'm not going to put myself in a scenario where I need to meet deadlines and be kind of put on the spot, creatively speaking.
Yeah.
Because it's hard, it's just like, how do you, I mean, I don't know. If I had what I'm going to call like a square job, if I had a square job, I don't even know how I would do that, to be like, well, now I got to do my job because the company that I'm working for needs me, but my head is not, it's not there. Like I can't, like I'm not going to do this company
Totally.
any positive things, because my headspace is not where it needs to be at 100%, So I was fortunate enough to be able to like step away.
Yeah, good for you for doing that, because I know a lot of people that are entrepreneurs or in this industry, or even people that have, normal 9-to-5 jobs. It's like, to be able to take a whole year off is like almost unheard of. It's like, especially as, when you're self-employed, like you never know where your next gig is coming, or where it's coming from, or when it's coming. So, I mean, it's really hard for us, like, you know, freelancers to even think about doing something like that, because it's like unless we're booked out in advance or we have a lot saved up or some other, you know, financial thing came through. But yeah, like it's hard. I rarely even take a week off ever. So it's like knowing, like, the fact that you took that time for yourself is amazing, dude.
Well, and it was scary too, because I remember being like, and thankfully most of my clients didn't. I mean, there's some that, you know, they want to do something and they end up going someplace else. And then that relationship gets blossomed, and it's all good. Like I didn't go into it with this weird blind mindset, you know, like I knew that there's possibilities of that stuff happening, but for the most part, my clients kind of stayed, you know, yeah, you know, I was very, very, very fortunate, you know. I mean, I wish I would have, you know, it was expensive to take a year off, and
absolutely,
but but it's what I needed to do at the end of the day. Like there's no, my brain was you know, because you're dealing with somebody close to me that died, and then the other part of it actually was like, I don't even know where I'm gonna go. Like musically speaking, it's like, where do I go from somebody like Prince? You know, I'm like, fuck. Like,
yeah,
because he was like, and you know, I know there's other people out there that I'm close with that have worked for him that don't really share the same enthusiasm, because they had a harder time. But for me, it was so the creative energy out there was so intense. You know, I mean, I'd have bad days for sure, right? But it was so intense that it was just like, wow, this is crazy to like watch this go down, right? So, you know, after he passed, it was just like, God, I don't even know, like, what am I going to do? And I remember when Chrissy asked me to come up to Bakersfield to engineer just a couple of writing sessions. I was actually in the beginning reluctant. I was like, I don't want to do that. You know, I wasn't like kind of feeling it, because I'm like, oh my God, to deal with another artist, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
You know, I've got, you know, to be honest, very, very fearful of being put in that scenario, not knowing if I'm necessarily ready to be put into that scenario, even though at that time it's been, you know, 4.5 years since, you know, Kelly was passed, and 4 years since P has passed, you know. But boy, am I sure glad I did.
I bet, yeah.
Because
I'm glad you did too.
Because Jonathan is, you know, and the boys, you know, but you know, yeah, it's very creative up there. So I'm really happy I didn't pass on it, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very very creative up there, very creative.
Yeah, like have you ever watched any of the interviews with oh God, what's her name? She just wrote a book. She was one of Prince's engineers.
Susan Rogers.
Susan Rogers. She has a pretty cool book out. But
sick.
She's done quite a few interviews with Sunset Sound, like talking about all of her experiences with Prince, and she had a lot of great things to say. But I feel like her, and there was another lady that worked with him, Peggy McCreary, I believe was her name, but she worked with Prince before Susan. And yeah, they had a lot of great things to say. At the same time, like you hear, like, you know, that he was difficult to work with a lot. And hearing your perspective, it seems like, well, maybe it's just it obviously depends on who he's working with, who he's vibing with. And if you're able to like really understand him and not mess up his creative flow, then obviously it sounds like you've had all your experiences, maybe besides a few, were positive.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I feel like in regards to him, it was kind of, because I don't really deem myself as being a be all end all. Like, I'm just a dude, you know? But you know, one of the benefits of when I was out there, the majority of the time, it was literally just him and I in the room. And when the band and stuff would come out there, his demeanor would change. Like, that's when he'd start to turn into kind of a little monster, you know? So I frankly didn't really have to deal with a lot of that, because again, most of the time it was just me and him in the room. The other thing, I think people, you know, as we were talking about earlier, people were quick to judge. You know, he was a guy that could be very funny, you know, but unless you're like sensitive to like people's energies, a lot of times you couldn't tell what kind of a mood he's in. And he always had this very like kind of face,
He's mysterious.
Yeah. And he would just talk to you. He's always just the same and blah, blah, so you didn't really know. So he would say something and you'd be like, man, what? But then you think about it, or I would think about it and be like, he's not necessarily trying to be that guy, right? He's a guy that's been super famous at an early age, and he doesn't have a filter. So it just comes out of him. And once you kind of like start realizing that he's not necessarily, the job would get easier. And then you'd start to like get his kind of joke manner where you're like, and there'd be times where I would just like scoff and like start laughing. And then I'd look at him and then he'd crack a grin, where like, I think most people would be like, wow, like this dude is like hammering on me.
Yeah.
And then take it like on a personal level. Yeah. Now, with that said, he can be difficult. But for me, I'm like, he wants what he wants. Who am I to judge?
Right.
Or to tell him what he wants, he wants what he wants, and I'm going to give it to him. I remember, one time he was out there and Larry Graham from Sly and the Family Stone, he was playing with Prince at the end. Anyhow, Larry Graham, he's the one that invented slap bass, right? So you talk about Larry Graham to like somebody like Flea, and Flea's going to like lose his mind, right? Like, so Larry Graham is like the godfather of slap bass. He was playing with Prince, right? And he's the most amazing, or one of the most amazing human beings you'll ever meet, Larry Graham. And he was out there, and I remember we were working, and those two were going to go have dinner, And I just remember that Prince looks at me and he goes, so when do you think you're going to figure me out? I remember I spun the chair around and I'm like, never. And I kind of got this grin on my face. He's like, you care to explain yourself? And I just told him, I was like, well, the moment I feel like I figured it out is the moment I'm going to like take liberty in something, and then I'm going to get in trouble.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I have an idea. You be the general. I'll be the foot soldier. You lead, I follow, and there'll be zero problems. And he was like, we'll go with that. So I kind of always maintained that thing. It's just like, it doesn't matter to me what you want. There's going to be no idea that's going to be overly crazy to me. I might look at you and be like, huh? Okay. But I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
Like if you tell me to do, you want me to drop a 67 into aquarium because you want to see, what a solo sounds like underwater.
That sounds fun.
It's your 67. Like, boom. You know what I mean? So we're, but he could be difficult for sure. But he just knew what he wanted, and he was chasing the idea in his head, and sometimes communicating that could be hard because he was definitely one that he would say something. You're like, I can interpret that 14 different ways. And then you won't get anything out of him to like help define what it needs to be. So then you're kind of like, I think this is what he needs, and you try to do it, you know what I mean? So that can get difficult.
So yeah, it seems like he's one to like enjoy constantly or often testing, people he works with. Yeah.
Bro.
Yeah.
Bro. He would like, I would come in and he would like, literally he'd pull, the cut lamps, the monitor cut lamps on like the SSL.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like he'd pull the caps off, pull the bulbs out, put the caps back on, put it down. James, I don't have any sound. You run in there and you're like trying to figure out why nothing's coming through the speakers. And then you'd have to like look and see, oh, those buttons are pressed down because he took out, but they're not lit because he took out the bulbs. Or you take out the small fader of the SSL, create a feedback loop, put the fader back where it should be at, negative infinity, and be like, why do I have this feedback loop? And it's just getting louder and louder and louder.
Wow.
Like you do like all the time. I'd come in and be like, why is the patch bay different? I don't know.
Wow.
I'm like, well, who was in here last night? Nobody. I'm like, well, that patch bay is definitely different. Well, how do you know? Oh, I know, bud.
I'm sure it was extremely frustrating in the moment, but like,
well, yeah, there'd be times where I'm like, why don't you help me help you, man? Like, why, know? But I don't know if it was just a rite of passage or if he was just trying to like make sure that I could keep up with him. I don't know what the mentality of it was. It was definitely frustrating at times where I'm like, God, man, stop. Like, like you're creating your own problems, right? Yeah. Do you not want to be working? Like, but I do have to say, like, I was just having a conversation with Michael Bland, who was the drummer for the NPG, and we both were talking about him and stuff, and and just how the reality is of like if you can go through that and come out the other side, because I know other people like engineers that went through him and they're not making music anymore. Like
just crushed them.
It killed them. But if you could come out on the other side, like you will be better. Everything about you will be better because he just demands on a level. And even like Michael said, he's like, yeah, it's to a level where like I've literally had to like kind of reel myself back because I'd be in rooms with these other musicians and I'd be just so on it that they're all like starting to get really intimidated by having me in the room, you know?
Ultimate recording engineering boot camp. Right?
Yeah. So, yeah. Oh boy.
I love it, man.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, before we wrap it up, is there anything you want to talk about, like the things you're excited that you've been working on this year? Anything you want to plug?
I mean, I want to plug Audio Test Kitchen.
Yeah.
Check that out. Yeah, we're going to be doing some more stuff here in the very near future, so I'm excited about that. And then, I mean, I think that's, I'm just doing my thing, so.
Hell yeah, man. Well, dude, thanks again for coming by. It's great to get to know you a bit and have a chat. And
thank you for having me.
Of course, dude. And everyone go check out his website, iamfluff.com. And if you want to work with him, feel free to get in touch. And
it's super outdated, by the way. I've been so busy. It's like hasn't been updated since like 2020.
Well, we'll put it in the show notes. And
Sorry.
If everyone wants to check it out, I'll put your Instagram and your website. And
thank you.
Everyone can go check you out.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, man. Well, dude, thank you so much. And
thank you, Alex.
Cheers. Thanks, guys.
Bye.